Imagine being shut out of a family celebration in a hotel only to reveal you secretly own every property in the entire chain. This story is about family betrayal, pride, and the sweetest kind of revenge. When those who dismissed your dreams and mocked your ambitions gather in what they believe is their territory, they're about to discover that the nobody they left behind now holds all the keys. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a gold-plated room key and a receipt they can't afford to pay. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm about to watch my family's world crumble in the marble lobby of their chosen hotel. The harbor-lined Seabrook Inn's lobby buzzed with tension at 3:45 p.m. on a humid August afternoon. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched my father's face turn that familiar shade of purple, the one I remembered from childhood whenever something didn't go his way. He stood at the reception desk, his fist pounding the marble surface while his voice echoed across the elegant space. "So, this is unacceptable," he roared at the young desk clerk, whose name tag read Marcus. "We booked the entire West Wing for our family reunion 6 months ago. My son specifically requested the Ocean View Suites, and now you're telling me they're unavailable." My brother Mark stood beside him, arms crossed, wearing that same entitled sneer I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. My sister Rachel typed furiously on her phone, probably posting about the incompetent staff to her social media followers. My mother Linda sat in one of the leather armchairs, fanning herself with a brochure, maintaining her practiced look of martyred suffering. I remained by the entrance, unnoticed in my tailored navy suit, watching this performance unfold. None of them had seen me yet. They were too focused on their tantrum to notice the woman observing them from 20 feet away. "Sir, I understand your frustration," Marcus said, maintaining remarkable composure. "But those suites were already reserved by another party. We have beautiful garden view rooms available." "Garden view," Mark scoffed. "Do you know who we are? The Carter family has been coming to this coastline for generations. My father managed a hotel in this very town. That was rich. Dad had been a mediocre middle manager at best, spending more time complaining about the owners than actually doing his job. But here was Mark, wielding it like some kind of royal lineage. "I demand to speak to your manager," Dad continued, his voice rising another octave. "Better yet, get me the owner of this establishment. I'll have your job for this incompetence." Rachel looked up from her phone. "Daddy, should I call our lawyer? This is probably breach of contract or something." The other guests in the lobby had started to stare. Some pulled out their phones, sensing drama worth recording. The entire Carter family circus was on full display, and they reveled in what they believed was their righteous indignation. Marcus glanced toward his supervisor, Jennifer, who was approaching with measured steps. I knew Jennifer well. I'd personally hired her 2 years ago when I acquired the Harbor Line chain. She was about to follow protocol and summon me, but I saved her the trouble. I walked forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The sound cut through the chaos like a knife through butter. "Is there a problem here?" I asked, my voice calm and professional. Dad spun around, ready to unleash his fury on another employee. Then he saw my face. The purple faded to white so quickly I thought he might faint. "Emily," my mother's voice was barely a whisper. Mark's mouth fell open. Rachel nearly dropped her phone. "Hello, family," I said, allowing myself the smallest smile. "I understand you're looking for the owner." Dad found his voice first, though it came out strangled. "What are you doing here?" I straightened my shoulders, savoring this moment I'd imagined 1,000 times but never planned. "You said you wanted to speak to the owner about your accommodation issues." "Don't be ridiculous!" Rachel snapped, recovering from her shock. "You work in some little boutique hotel in Rhode Island. This is Harbor Line. This is mine." I finished for her. The entire Harbor Line chain. All 43 properties, including this one. Especially this one. I turned to Marcus and Jennifer. "Thank you both for handling this situation professionally. I'll take it from here." The lobby had gone silent. Even the jazz music playing softly in the background seemed to pause for effect. My family stood frozen, looking like characters in a tableau of confusion and disbelief. Dad's face cycled through several colors before landing on a mottled red. "That's impossible!" "Aurora Hospitality acquired Harborline Hotels 18 months ago," I said, my tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "I believe you've been following the business news. Dad, the merger was featured in the Wall Street Journal. Boutique hotel mogul expands empire." I think the headline read. Mark laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Aurora Hospitality. You're saying you work for Aurora Hospitality?" "No," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "I'm saying I own Aurora Hospitality. Every property, every franchise, every single brass door handle and Egyptian cotton sheet." I paused, letting the weight of it sink in, including the ones you're so desperately fighting for right now. The transformation in their faces was worth every 16-hour day, every sacrificed weekend, every moment of doubt I'd pushed through to get here. This wasn't how I'd planned to tell them, but standing in this lobby, the sister hotel to the one where Dad had crushed my dreams so many years ago, it felt like poetic justice. "You wanted to see the owner," I said, spreading my arms slightly. "You're looking at her, growing up in Seabrook, Oregon. I learned early that I was the wrong kind of Carter child. The town itself was beautiful, a postcard-perfect coastal community where fog rolled in each morning at 6:30 a.m. and lifted by noon to reveal pristine beaches and weathered cedar buildings. Population barely 3,000 souls, most of whom knew each other's business better than their own. Our house sat 4 blocks from the Seabrook Grand Hotel, where my father, Daniel Carter, spent 12 years as operations manager. It was the only real hotel in town, a 3-story Victorian structure that had seen better days but still drew summer tourists seeking authentic coastal charm. Dad never owned it, never would, but he ruled those hallways like a bitter king surveying a kingdom that would never truly be his. I was 7 when I first followed him to work on a Saturday morning, while he barked orders at housekeeping staff. I wandered the halls, mesmerized, the patterns in the carpet, the way light filtered through the old glass windows, the soft ding of the elevator arriving at each floor. It all felt like magic. I spent hours in the lobby, watching guests check in, studying their faces transform from travel-weary to relieved as they received their room keys. "Emily's playing hotel again," my brother Mark would announce at dinner, voice dripping with disdain. He was 4 years older and already Dad's golden child, destined for real business, which meant anything that didn't involve serving others, as Dad put it. "It's not playing." I'd protest, clutching my notebook where I'd sketched improved lobby layouts and written ideas for better breakfast menus. "Leave her alone," Mom would murmur, but it was always half-hearted. Linda Carter was a woman who'd learned that keeping peace meant keeping quiet. She'd dab her lips with her napkin and change the subject to Mark's football practice or Rachel's dance recital. Rachel, 2 years younger than me, had learned early which side brought rewards. "Emily's weird," she'd chime in, earning an approving nod from Dad. She spent all recess drawing pictures of hotel rooms. Mrs. Peterson asked if everything was okay at home. Dad's response was always the same, a heavy sigh, followed by some variation of, "Emily needs to get her head out of the clouds. Hospitality is servant's work. You smile while people treat you like dirt, then clean up their messes when they leave. That's all it is." But he was wrong. I saw what he refused to see: the joy on a bride's face when she saw the honeymoon suite, the relief of a traveling family finding shelter during a storm, the small moments of human connection that happened in those spaces. Hotels weren't just buildings, they were stages for life's dramas, refuges for the weary, kingdoms of possibility. By high school, my obsession had become the family joke. At Thanksgiving, Uncle Pete would ask, "So, Emily, built your hotel empire yet?" And everyone would laugh. At Christmas, Rachel would gift me toy hotel sets from the dollar store, wrapped in newspaper, while she and Mark received real presents. I stopped sharing my dreams with them. Instead, I volunteered at the Seabrook Grand every summer, working for free just to learn. I memorized guest preferences, studied booking patterns, and wrote detailed reports that I'd show to Mr. Harrison, the actual owner. He'd pat my head and tell me I had spunk, but I could see in his eyes that he, like everyone else, thought I was just a silly girl with silly dreams. The breaking point came senior year. I'd gotten into Brighton University's hospitality management program with a partial scholarship not enough to cover everything, but enough to make it possible if I had help. I presented my parents with the acceptance letter at dinner, hands trembling with excitement. Mom smiled weakly. "That's nice, dear." Mark snorted. "Hospitality management. That's a degree now. What's next? A PhD in making beds?" Rachel didn't look up from her phone. "Brighton's like, 6 hours away. Who's going to drive me to dance?" But it was Dad's reaction that crushed me. He set down his fork, looked at the letter, then at me with those cold gray eyes. "Absolutely not," he said. "That's a waste of time and money. Real business is learned on the floor, not in classrooms. If you want to work in hotels, fine. Get a job at the front desk. Work your way up like everyone else." "But Dad, this is my chance to—" To what? To go into debt for a degree that teaches you how to fold towels with fancy corners, to learn 5 different ways to say, "How may I help you?" from professors who've never worked a day in their lives. "Daniel," Mom ventured quietly, "maybe we should consider what we have 2 other children to think about. Mark's pre-law track at state. Rachel's activities. We're not wasting resources on Emily's fantasy." Resources. That's what my dreams were to them, a waste of resources. That night, I sat in my room, acceptance letter in hand, listening to my family downstairs planning Mark's graduation party and discussing Rachel's potential modeling career. The message was clear, their dreams mattered. Mine didn't. I looked out my window at the lights of the Seabrook Grand in the distance. Somewhere in that building, my father was probably berating a housekeeper for improperly folded towels or complaining about the owners who didn't appreciate his genius. He'd never see hotels the way I did. None of them would. But I would prove them wrong. Even if I had to do it alone, I went to Brighton University anyway. The night before I left, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases while my family attended Mark's graduation party at the country club. They hadn't even remembered I was leaving the next day. I'd saved $3,000 from my work at the Seabrook Grand, every penny of tips, every overtime hour, every holiday shift when others wanted to be with their families. It would cover my first semester's housing and meal plan. Barely. "You're making a mistake," Dad said when he found me loading my car at 5 a.m. He stood in his robe, coffee mug in hand, looking more irritated than concerned. "When this fails, don't come crying to us." "I won't," I promised, and I meant it. Brighton University was everything and nothing like I'd imagined. The hospitality program was rigorous, demanding, and absolutely perfect. While my roommates went to parties, I was in the library studying revenue management. While they dated and joined sororities, I worked 3 jobs: night desk clerk at a budget motel, breakfast server at a diner, weekend laundry service at a local inn. My days started at 4:30 a.m. and ended at midnight. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches and instant ramen, saving every dollar that didn't go toward tuition. My clothes came from thrift stores. I walked everywhere because I couldn't afford bus fare. When my laptop died sophomore year, I handwrote assignments and begged for computer lab time. "Why don't you just ask your parents for help?" my roommate Jessica asked one night, finding me asleep over my textbooks again. "They're helping my siblings," I said simply. It wasn't a lie. Mark had gotten into law school fully funded by our parents. Rachel had started at a performing arts academy also parent-funded. The family group chat, which I was still technically part of but never participated in, was full of their achievements. Mark made law review. Mom would write, "Rachel booked a commercial." Dad would add, "No one ever asked about me." The loneliness was crushing. Thanksgiving meant volunteering to work extra shifts while classmates went home. Christmas was spent alone in my dorm, studying for finals while maintenance fixed a broken heater. I told myself each moment of isolation was fuel for my ambition. Professor Thompson changed everything. She taught strategic hotel management and had actually built her own boutique hotel chain before selling it to teach. She saw something in me that no one else had. "You understand this business at a molecular level," she told me after I'd presented a restructuring plan for a failing hotel case study. "But you're holding back. Why?" "I'm not holding back," I protested. "I got the highest grade." "Grades don't build empires, Emily. Confidence does. You apologize before every presentation. You qualify every good idea with maybe or possibly. Stop asking for permission to be brilliant." She was right. Years of being dismissed had taught me to make myself small, to couch my ideas in uncertainty. But here, 3,000 miles from home, I didn't need anyone's permission. I started speaking up in class. I entered case competitions and won them. I wrote a thesis on boutique hotel differentiation that got published in an industry journal. When recruiters came to campus, I didn't apologize for my shabby suit or explain why I couldn't afford to travel for interviews. I let my work speak for itself. Still, the calls home were brutal. "Emily's still playing hotel," I'd hear Rachel say in the background during my monthly check-in calls with Mom. "Is she at least dating anyone?" Dad would ask, as if marriage might salvage my poor life choices. When are you going to get serious about your future?" Mark asked during his law school graduation, which I'd attended by taking an overnight bus and sleeping in the station because I couldn't afford a hotel room. The irony wasn't lost on me. Senior year, I won the Thompson Excellence Award, a $10,000 prize for the best hospitality business plan. My concept was simple luxury boutique hotels that felt like homes, with hyper-local experiences and staff empowered to create magical moments without management approval. Professor Thompson called it revolutionary in its simplicity. The award came with something more valuable than money: an introduction to Margaret O'Donnell, a legend in the industry who'd built and sold 3 hotel chains. "Your plan is solid," Margaret told me over coffee in Boston, where I'd traveled using my prize money. "But plans don't matter without capital. How much can you raise?" "I have 15,000 saved," I said, not mentioning it had taken 4 years of 70-hour weeks to accumulate. She laughed, but not unkindly. "That won't buy you a decent hotel sign. But I like your hunger. Work for me for 2 years. Learn everything. Save everything. Then we'll talk." I graduated summa cum laude. My family didn't attend the ceremony. Dad had a golf tournament. Mom was helping Rachel move to Los Angeles for pilot season. Mark was studying for the bar. They sent a card, one of those generic ones from the drugstore. Inside, Dad had written, "Hope you got it out of your system. The Seabrook Grand is hiring if you want real work." I tucked the card into my journal, next to my business plan and Margaret's business card. They thought I'd gotten it out of my system. They had no idea I was just getting started. That night, alone in my empty dorm room with my degree in one hand and a job offer from Margaret O'Donnell in the other, I made myself a promise I would build something so undeniable, so successful, that even my family couldn't dismiss it. No, that wasn't quite right. I wasn't building it for them anymore. I was building it despite them. Working for Margaret O'Donnell was like getting a PhD in hotel warfare. She put me through every position imaginable: night auditor, housekeeping supervisor, food service manager, even maintenance coordinator. "You can't lead what you don't understand," she'd say, watching me unclog toilets at 3 a.m. or deal with drunk guests at her flagship property in Boston. But it was the business side where Margaret truly shaped me. She taught me to read balance sheets like tea leaves, to spot undervalued properties from their tax records, to negotiate with banks who saw a young woman and assumed easy prey. She was ruthless, brilliant, and absolutely unforgiving of excuses. "So family doubted you." "So what?" she said when I'd tried to explain my background. "Half the world doubted me. Irish immigrant, single mother, started with nothing but a cleaning cart. You want sympathy or you want success? I wanted success. For 2 years, I shadowed her every move. I saved 90% of my salary, living in a converted storage room above one of her hotels. I ate staff meals, wore the same 5 outfits in rotation, and documented everything I learned in journals that would eventually fill 3 shelves. Then Margaret called me into her office on a rainy Thursday in October. "There's a property in Providence," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "The Bayside Inn, 42 rooms, built in 1987, hemorrhaging money for 3 years. Owner's divorcing, needs quick sale. They're asking $800,000. My heart sank. Even with my savings and the prize money, I had barely $60,000. "I'll lend you $300,000, Margaret continued. "Banks might cover another $300,000 if you can show them something compelling. The rest, you'll have to figure out." Why, I asked, "Why would you do this?" "Because you remind me of myself, except you're smarter and starting younger. And because I want to see if you have the guts to pull the trigger when it counts." I spent the next 3 weeks living on coffee and determination. I created a business plan that would have made Professor Thompson proud. Detailed projections, market analysis, renovation plans that would transform the Bayside from a tired roadside motel into a destination. I pitched 23 banks. 22 said no. The 23rd, a small credit union run by a woman named Barbara Hendricks, said maybe. "You're young," Barbara said bluntly. "No track record of ownership, no significant assets. But this plan is something. And Margaret O'Donnell doesn't back losers. We'll give you $200,000. I was still short. I sold my car, my laptop, everything except my work clothes and journals. I borrowed $50,000 from a hard money lender at criminal interest rates. I maxed out 3 credit cards. I took a weekend job at a call center, working remotely from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. On December 15th, at 2:15 p.m., I signed the papers. The Bayside Inn was mine. The first night, I walked through every room of my dilapidated kingdom, peeling wallpaper, stained carpets, a lobby that smelled like forgotten dreams and mildew. The previous owner had left a bottle of champagne in the office, probably meant ironically. I sat on the floor, drinking it from a coffee mug I'd found in the break room, and cried. Not from sadness, from the sheer terror and joy of finally beginning. The renovation nearly killed me. I did most of the work myself to save money, learning to patch drywall from YouTube videos at midnight, painting until my arms shook, installing fixtures with instructions in 3 languages. I hired only essential contractors, negotiating every penny, sometimes paying in installments when cash flow strangled me. I renamed it Aurora Suites after the dawn, after new beginnings. The logo was a stylized sun rising over waves, designed by an art student I'd paid in free weekend stays for her parents. Every detail mattered. Instead of generic hotel art, I commissioned local artists, paying them in exposure and future commissions. Instead of standard amenities, I partnered with local businesses, coffee from the roaster down the street, pastries from the bakery that had been there since 1952, soaps from a woman who made them in her garage. I trained my staff, all 6 of them, to treat every guest like they were checking into their best friend's guest room. No scripts, no corporate coldness, just genuine warmth and the power to fix problems without asking permission. "You're giving them too much autonomy," a consultant told me. "You'll lose control." But I remembered every time I'd watched my father powerlessly enforce policies he didn't believe in, every time a guest left unhappy because no one could make a simple decision without 3 levels of approval. Opening day was January 10th. We had 3 reservations. By February, we had 15% occupancy. By March, 30%. I was eating ramen again, anxiety keeping me awake as interest payments loomed. The hard money lender called daily. The credit card companies sent increasingly urgent letters. Then, in April, a travel blogger stayed with us. She had 12,000 followers, not massive, but engaged. Her review began, "Aurora Suites isn't just a hotel. It's what happens when someone who actually gives a damn about your experience decides to create something magical. The review went viral in the boutique travel community. May hit 60% occupancy. June, 75. By July, we were booking solid at 90%, with a waiting list for weekends. The first year ended with Aurora Suites not just profitable, but featured in Travel Plus Leisure's Hidden Gems of New England. The night that article published, I sat in my office, the same one where I'd drunk champagne from a coffee mug, and pulled out my phone. I started to text my family, to share this victory. Then I stopped. They hadn't called once since I'd bought the property. Mom had sent a Christmas card addressed to my old apartment. The family group chat continued without me, full of Mark's legal victories and Rachel's pilot season adventures. Instead, I called Margaret. "Congratulations," she said simply. "Now do it again." So I did. The second Aurora property came faster than the first. A failed bed and breakfast in Newport, purchased with the profits from Providence and a much friendlier bank loan. The third and fourth were a package deal twin properties in Burlington that a corporate chain had abandoned. By year 3, I had 9 hotels. By year 5, 22. By year 7, Aurora Hospitality owned 43 properties across the Northeast. The business media noticed before my family did. Emily Carter, the 31-year-old disrupting boutique hospitality, read the Forbes headline. The article called me the anti-corporate hotelier and praised Aurora's model of hyper-local luxury. The photo they used showed me in the Providence lobby, surrounded by my staff, all of us laughing at something off camera. I looked happy. I looked successful. I looked nothing like the girl who'd been dismissed at family dinners. The Wall Street Journal followed, then Fortune, then an interview on Bloomberg where I talked about sustainable growth and employee empowerment. The host asked about my background. "My father worked in hotels," I said simply. "I learned a lot watching him." It wasn't a lie. I had learned from watching him, learned everything not to do. The expansion wasn't without casualties. Relationships were impossible when you worked 18-hour days. Friends drifted away when you couldn't make dinners or weekend trips. Dating became a series of apologetic texts. "Sorry, property crisis in Boston," or "Rain check Burlington needs me." But I had something else, a family of sorts. My staff across all properties, many of whom had been with me since the early days. Margaret, who'd become more mother to me than my own. The network of local vendors and artists who'd grown with Aurora. The regular guests who requested specific rooms and sent holiday cards to my office. The Harborline acquisition was Margaret's idea. "They're struggling," she told me over our monthly dinner in September. 48 properties, mostly coastal, perfect geographic fit with Aurora. The family that owns them wants out, but quietly. They need someone who can move fast and won't gut their legacy. Harborline Hotels had been an institution since 1962. Solid, respectable, but stuck in time. Their properties were prime real estate with tired execution. It would cost everything I had plus leverage I wasn't sure I could handle. "One of their properties is in Oregon," Margaret mentioned casually. "Seabrook, actually, the old Grand Hotel." My wine glass stopped halfway to my lips. The Seabrook Grand is part of Harborline. "Has been for 15 years, renamed it Harborline Seabrook Inn. Your father still works there, doesn't he?" I set down my glass carefully. "I wouldn't know." Margaret studied me. "This isn't about revenge, Emily. Bad business to buy with your heart instead of your head." She was right. Of course. But when I toured the portfolio, when I ran the numbers, when I negotiated with the Harborline family, it wasn't revenge driving me. It was opportunity. These properties could be magnificent with the Aurora touch. The deal closed on a Friday in March at 4:30 p.m. 48 properties, including the hotel where my father had spent his career dismissing my dreams. The irony was so thick you could serve it at afternoon tea. I didn't announce the acquisition immediately. Instead, I spent 6 months quietly implementing changes, retraining staff, updating systems, renovating the most critical areas. I promoted the best managers, relocated the worst, and slowly infused the Aurora philosophy into Harborline's DNA. The media release went out in September. Aurora Hospitality acquires Harborline Hotels in Northeast's largest boutique merger. My phone exploded with congratulations from industry contacts. My email filled with interview requests. The Financial Times called it a masterclass in strategic expansion. Not a word from my family. I found out they knew when my CFO forwarded me a Google alert 2 weeks later. Rachel had posted on Instagram, so apparently my sister owns some hotels now random. Anyway, here's my audition look for today. Mark had commented trust fund baby probably bankrolled her. The comments from their friends were worse, but one stood out, from my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia. Isn't that the chain with the Seabrook Hotel? Daniel must be so proud. Daniel wasn't proud. I knew because I'd seen his employee records when reviewing Harborline staff. He'd never mentioned me. His emergency contact was still Mom. His bio in the employee newsletter mentioned his 2 successful children, a lawyer son and actress daughter. 3 months after the acquisition, I held an all-hands meeting for Aurora Hospitality leadership. We gathered at the flagship property in Providence. 200 of my best people from across both legacy brands. We're not just in the hotel business, I told them from the stage, looking out at faces that had become family. We're in the business of creating moments. Every guest who walks through our doors is carrying something: joy, sorrow, exhaustion, excitement. Our job is to meet them where they are and lift them a little higher. The room erupted in applause. These people got it. They got me. They'd taken a chance on a nobody with everything to prove and nothing to lose. That night, I stood on the roof of my Providence hotel, looking out at the city lights. 43 Aurora properties plus 48 Harborline properties. 91 hotels bearing my vision. $800 million in assets under management. 3,000 employees who believed in what we were building. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, then saw the preview, saw the news about Harborline. Still playing hotel, Dad. I deleted it without responding and went back to watching the sunrise paint the sky Aurora pink. I hadn't built this empire to prove anything to him anymore, but if he happened to learn about it while I changed his entire industry, well, that was just good business. The email arrived on a Tuesday at 9:43 a.m. while I was reviewing renovation plans for our Martha's Vineyard property. Subject: Carter family reunion. Save the date. I almost deleted it immediately, but morbid curiosity won. Aunt Patricia had sent it to what must have been an old email address that forwarded to my current one. The message was addressed to Carter Family and Extended Relations. I was clearly an afterthought, probably added when someone remembered I existed. How dear family Mark and Amanda are thrilled to announce the first annual Carter Family Reunion Weekend in celebration of Mark making partner at Henderson, Whitmore and Associates. We're gathering for a spectacular weekend at the beautiful Harborline Seabrook Inn, August 23rd, 25. I read that line 3 times. The Harborline Seabrook Inn, my hotel, the one I'd acquired 18 months ago. The email continued with nauseating enthusiasm about reconnecting with our roots and celebrating the Carter legacy. There was a link to a website Mark had created, complete with family photos. I wasn't in any of them. I pulled up our reservation system. There it was, a block of 12 rooms under Carter Family Reunion, booked 6 months ago when it was still technically Harborline, just before the Aurora rebrand was announced. They'd specifically requested the West Wing Ocean View Suites and the Seahawk Ballroom for Saturday night. My finger hovered over the delete key. I could cancel their reservation, claim overbooking, make the whole thing disappear. But that would be petty. That would be something Dad would do. Instead, I marked my calendar and went back to work. As August approached, I monitored the family group chat I'd never left but hadn't participated in for 3 years. The messages painted a picture of escalating excitement. Mom, can't wait to see everyone. Daniel has so many stories about the hotel from his management days. Mark, Amanda's family is flying in from Connecticut. Partner announcement, plus family reunion, perfect weekend. Rachel, OMG, the Seabrook Inn is supposed to be gorgeous now. Like totally upgraded. Instagram worthy for sure. Aunt Patricia, should we invite Emily? Does anyone have her current information? Dad, she's probably too busy with her little hotel job to make it. Mark, if she even still works in hotels. Last I heard she was managing some motel in Rhode Island. Rachel, lol, remember when she used to draw hotel floor plans in her notebooks, so random. I screenshot every message. The week before the reunion, I called Jennifer, my general manager at the Seabrook property. The Carter reunion, I said. I need you to handle something for me. Whatever you need, Emily. So they've requested Ocean View Suites in the West Wing. Those are being renovated, aren't they? Actually, we could accommodate. No, I said quietly. They get standard garden view rooms. And Jennifer, I'll be in town that weekend. Don't mention it to anyone. I flew into Portland on Friday morning and drove the 2 hours to Seabrook in a rental car. The town looked exactly the same weathered cedar buildings, coastal fog, the smell of salt and regret. I checked into a small bed and breakfast 3 towns over, not ready to stay in my own hotel. Not yet. Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m., I sat in my car across from the Harbor Line Seabrook Inn, watching my family arrive. Dad pulled up in the same Buick he'd driven for 15 years, parking in what used to be his reserved spot from his management days. It wasn't reserved anymore. I'd eliminated all reserved spots except for accessibility needs, but old habits died hard. Mark arrived in a Tesla, Amanda beside him looking like she'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Rachel came in an Uber, dragging designer luggage and taking selfies before she'd even reached the door. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins trickled in, all dressed in their reunion best. I waited until 3:30 p.m., then drove to the hotel and parked in the back. I entered through the employee entrance, nodding at staff who recognized me but knew better than to make a scene. Jennifer met me in the back office. "They're not happy about the rooms," she reported, trying not to smile. "Your father has asked to speak to the manager 3 times. Your brother is threatening to leave bad reviews on every platform. And I told them the manager wasn't available, but the owner might be able to address their concerns tomorrow." "Perfect. How's the ballroom set up?" "Exactly as they requested. The birthday cake for your father just arrived. Apparently it's his 65th. "A birthday party. They were throwing Dad a birthday party at my hotel, and I hadn't even known it was his birthday." I spent the rest of Saturday in my office, watching the security feeds. My family had taken over the lobby bar, Dad holding court with stories about his hotel, about how he'd practically run this place back in the day. Mark was loudly discussing his partnership, making sure everyone heard his salary range. Rachel was doing Instagram live tours, complaining about the basic rooms while praising the aesthetic of the renovated spaces. At 8 p.m., they moved to the ballroom, through the security camera. I watched them toast Dad, toast Mark, toast the Carter family legacy. Uncle Pete gave a speech about building something from nothing and the value of hard work. Mom cried. Everyone applauded. Not once did anyone mention my name. At 10:15 p.m., after most of the older relatives had gone to bed, the remaining family returned to the bar. That's when things got interesting. "This place has really changed," Dad was saying, his voice carrying new ownership. I heard. Some corporation from Boston. Aurora Hospitality. Mark read from his phone. "Looks like they bought the whole Harbor Line chain. Big money behind it." "Probably foreign investors," Dad muttered. "These places always get bought up by people who don't understand the business. Don't respect the history?" I stood in the shadows of the hallway, close enough to hear every word. "At least it's not like Emily's fantasy." Rachel laughed. "Remember when she said she'd own a hotel empire god? She was so serious about it, too." "Well, whatever happened to her anyway?" Aunt Patricia asked. "Nobody's heard from her in years." "Working at some roadside motel last I heard," Dad said dismissively. "She went to that fancy college, got all those ideas in her head, then reality hit. Happens to kids who don't listen to their parents." "Such a shame," Mom sighed. She had potential, just misdirected. Potential for what? Mark scoffed. She was always living in a fantasy world. Drew pictures of hotels like other kids drew princesses. It was weird. It was embarrassing, Dad corrected. Do you know how many times people asked me why my daughter was obsessed with my workplace, like I'd forced her into it? Meanwhile, I was trying to show her real opportunities, real careers. I'd heard enough. I returned to my office and pulled up their registration. With a few keystrokes, I scheduled a 7 a.m. wake-up call for every Carter room. Petty maybe. Satisfying absolutely. Tomorrow, they'd meet the owner. Tonight, let them enjoy their illusions. Sunday arrived with coastal fog and my family's fury. By 10 a.m., they'd assembled in the lobby like an angry mob. Dad was at the front desk, his face that dangerous purple shade, while Mark paced behind him typing what was probably a scathing Yelp review. Rachel filmed everything, muttering about discrimination and probably illegal treatment. 7 a.m. wake-up calls that we didn't request. Dad was shouting at poor Marcus, who maintained his professional composure. Garden view rooms when we specifically booked ocean view suites. This is targeted harassment. I know the previous owners. I managed hotels for 20 years. This is unacceptable. Jennifer appeared, perfectly timed. Sir, I understand your frustration. The owner has agreed to meet with your family privately to address your concerns. If you'll follow me to conference room A. The Carters exchanged glances finally. Someone with real authority. They followed Jennifer like a vindicated parade. Dad muttering about lawsuits and Mark assuring Amanda that his firm would destroy this place if needed. I waited 5 minutes, then entered through the conference room's side door. The room fell silent. Not the respectful silence of a business meeting, but the shocked, disbelieving silence of people seeing a ghost. Hello, everyone, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. I understand you have some concerns about your stay. Dad found his voice first. What kind of joke is this? No joke, I replied, pulling out my tablet and opening their reservation. The Carter family reunion, 12 rooms, originally booked for Ocean View Suites, which were unfortunately under renovation. You were offered comparable Garden View rooms at a significant discount. Is there a problem with the accommodations? Emily, Mom's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? Working, I said simply. This is my hotel. Well, one of them. Mark laughed, but it was nervous, uncertain. Right. You work here. In what? Guest services. Is this some kind of revenge prank? I pulled up the corporate structure on my tablet and turned it toward them. Aurora Hospitality Group, founded 2018. Founder and CEO Emily Carter. We own 91 properties across the Northeast, including the entire former Harbor Line chain, purchased 18 months ago. That's impossible, Dad said flatly. Aurora Hospitality is a multi-million-dollar company. It was in the Wall Street Journal. $800 million in assets, actually, I corrected. And yes, that was a nice article. They used a photo from the Providence property. Would you like to see it? I pulled up the article on my phone. The headline clear, Emily Carter's Aurora Hospitality Reshapes Boutique Hotel Landscape. Rachel grabbed the phone, her face cycling through expressions like a slot machine. This is fake. It has to be. Google it, I suggested. Mark was already on his phone, fingers flying. His face went white, then red, then a mottled combination. Holy shit, he breathed, then showed his screen to Amanda, who looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. You own this hotel, Dad said slowly, as if testing the words. You own the hotel where I worked. Where you were operations manager? Yes, I said, although I should note, your personnel file is interesting reading. Lots of complaints from staff about hostile management style. Several warnings about inappropriate comments to female employees. You're lucky the previous owners didn't... How? He interrupted. How is this possible? You were working at some motel in Rhode Island. I owned that motel in Rhode Island. It was my first property. I bought it 2 years after graduating summa cum laude from Brighton University, the degree you said was worthless. Remember, the one you refused to help pay for because it was a waste of resources. Mom started crying. Emily, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know, I said calmly. You never asked. Not once in 7 years did any of you ask what I was doing. The family group chat has been very illuminating, though, apparently, I was probably too busy with my little hotel job to be invited to this reunion. We tried to invite you, Aunt Patricia protested. Nobody had your contact information. My email hasn't changed since college. My phone number is the same. I'm on LinkedIn, for God's sake. I've been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and Bloomberg. But sure, I was impossible to find. Mark set his phone down carefully. You're really the CEO. I'm really the CEO. Of all these hotels? All 91. Including this one. Especially this one. Dad stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. My daughter isn't some corporate mogul. She was a dreamy kid who drew pictures of lobbies and thought hotels were magical. She didn't have what it takes to what? I interrupted, standing as well. To succeed, to build something to prove you wrong. To face reality, he shouted. The real world doesn't care about your dreams. Emily, I tried to teach you that. No, I said quietly. You tried to teach me that my dreams were worthless, that I was wasting my time, that I should settle for being someone's employee instead of building my own empire. Empire, he scoffed. You got lucky. Some investor probably... Margaret O'Donnell invested $300,000 in my first property after I'd already raised $500,000 on my own. I paid her back with interest in 18 months. Every property since has been funded by profits and legitimate bank loans based on my proven track record. But you'd know that if you'd read any of the articles about me. Rachel held up her phone. There are dozens of articles. Harvard Business Review did a case study on your expansion model. That's nice, dear, I said, echoing Mom's dismissive tone from years ago. The room went quiet again. Mark cleared his throat. So, about our rooms? Are exactly what you deserve, I said. Garden view, standard amenities, same as any other guest who books late and expects special treatment. But we're family, Mom said weakly. Are we? I asked, because family typically knows when you graduate college. Family congratulates you when you buy your first business. Family doesn't mock your dreams at every holiday dinner and then forget you exist when those dreams come true. We could have helped, Mark said suddenly. If we'd known you were building this, we could have invested, been partners. Like you helped with my college tuition, like you were partners in my dreams when I was 17 and begging for support. Dad's face was purple again. You can't talk to us like this. We're your family. We're guests in your hotel. This is unprofessional. You're right, I said, gathering my things. It is unprofessional, which is why this conversation is over. You're welcome to stay through your reservation. The staff will treat you with the courtesy we extend to all guests. But understand this, you're not VIPs. You're not special. You're just customers who happen to share my DNA. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Dad, happy 65th birthday. I noticed the cake last night. German chocolate, Mom's recipe. The same cake you had at every birthday where you told everyone about Mark's achievements and Rachel's potential while I served the plates. Emily, wait, Mom started. I have an empire to run, I said. Checkout is at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late, we charge for extended stays. I left them sitting in that conference room, staring at the ghost of the daughter they'd dismissed, now wearing a CEO's suit and holding the keys to everything they'd said I'd never have. I thought that would be the end of it. I'd said my piece, revealed my success, and put them in their place. But my family had one more scene to play out. Monday morning at 10:45 15 minutes before checkout. I watched from my office as they gathered in the lobby. Dad was at the front desk again, but this time Mom, Mark, Rachel, and even some of the extended family flanked him like a small army. Jennifer's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Emily, they're asking for you. Should I—" "I'll handle it," I said, straightening my jacket. One last performance. The lobby was busier than yesterday, filled with regular guests checking out, new arrivals wandering in. Perfect. If they wanted a scene, they'd have an audience. "There she is!" Rachel announced loudly, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. Several guests turned to stare. Dad stepped forward, pulling out his credit card with theatrical flair. "We're checking out. Process this." Marcus began the transaction, but the card reader beeped declined. "Try it again," Dad demanded. Another beep, declined. "There must be a mistake," he said, his voice rising. "That card has a $20,000 limit." Mark tried his card, declined. Then another, declined. I hadn't done this. I hadn't touched their payments or accounts. This was pure cosmic justice, and I wasn't about to waste it. "Is there a problem?" I asked, approaching the desk. "Your system is rejecting our cards," Mark accused. "This is obviously intentional." "Our system doesn't reject valid payments," I said calmly. "Perhaps you should call your banks." Mom was already on her phone, her face growing pale. "They're saying unusual activity, multiple charges at restaurants and bars over the weekend. They've frozen the account pending investigation." Of course, they'd been living large all weekend, showing off for the family reunion, running up tabs they assumed their success could cover. Mark the new partner, Dad the veteran hotel manager, Rachel the rising star they'd played their roles too well. "This is sabotage," Dad sputtered, but even he didn't seem to believe it. The lobby was watching now, guests and staff alike. My family stood there, credit cards scattered on the marble counter like fallen soldiers, their superiority evaporating with each declined transaction. "The bill is $8,432, Marcus said quietly, "for 12 rooms, plus incidentals." "8,000, Aunt Patricia gasped, "for 2 nights." "Peak season rates," I explained, "plus the ballroom rental, catering, the premium bar package you selected, and various room service charges, all clearly outlined in your reservation agreement." Mark was sweating. "We need to speak privately about this." "No," I said. "You wanted to make a scene in my lobby. Let's finish it here." Dad's face cycled through colors I didn't know were humanly possible. "You did this. Somehow. You orchestrated all of this." "I orchestrated nothing. You booked a reunion you couldn't afford, at a hotel you didn't research, to celebrate achievements that were built on the foundation of dismissing mine. I just own the stage where your choices are playing out." Rachel started crying, not sad tears, but angry ones. "This is so unfair. We're your family." "You're right," I said. "It is unfair. It was unfair when I worked 3 jobs to pay for college while you got your dance classes covered. It was unfair when I slept in bus stations to attend Mark's graduation while he got a new car for passing the bar. It was unfair when Dad told everyone at holidays that he had 2 successful children while I was building something from nothing." The lobby had gone silent except for the soft jazz playing overhead. "But here's what I'll do," I continued, "because I'm not you, because I built this empire on taking care of people, not stepping on them." I turned to Marcus. "Comp their stay. All of it." Gasps from my family, murmurs from the watching guests. "But," I raised my hand, "there's a condition." Dad's jaw tightened. "What condition?" "Shh, you leave. Now. You don't come back to any Aurora property, and you treat my staff, all of them, at every hotel you ever visit with the respect you never showed me. Every housekeeper, every desk clerk, every maintenance worker who's just serving you. They're all someone's daughter or son with dreams you know nothing about." "You're banning us?" Mom asked, incredulous. "I'm giving you a gift you don't deserve and asking for basic human decency in return. Your choice." Mark looked at his wife. who hadn't said a word but whose expression suggested she'd be having many words with him later. Rachel had stopped filming some moments. Apparently, weren't for Instagram. The extended family had already started edging toward the doors. Dad stood there for a long moment, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out. The rest followed, a parade of muted shame and confused privilege. Only Mom lingered, approaching me tentatively. "Emily, Checkout was 15 minutes ago," I said gently but firmly. "Travel safe?" She left without another word. I stood in my lobby, my marble and glass kingdom, watching my family disappear into the August morning. The regular guests went back to their business, the staff resumed their duties, and the jazz played on. Jennifer approached with a tablet showing the zeroed-out bill. "That was $8,000 of revenue lost." "No," I corrected, looking at the door my family had walked through. "That was $8,000 I paid to finally close an account that's been open for 34 years. Best money I've ever spent." That afternoon, I stood on the beach behind the hotel, watching the waves crash against the shore. The same beach where I'd dreamed of building something magnificent while my family told me to be realistic. My phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Heard you had some interesting guests this weekend." "Family," I texted back. She replied, "the most expensive kind." I laughed, real and free, the salt air filling my lungs. Somewhere out there, my family was driving home with a story they'd never tell honestly, a lesson they'd probably never learn, and a daughter they'd never really known. But I had my empire, I had my truth, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that every single room key in my hotels opened a door they'd told me would never exist. The sweetest revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a smile, a comped bill, and the knowledge that you became everything they said you couldn't be, not for them, not to spite them, but because you finally believed in yourself more than you believed in their doubts. The Seabrook Grand had been my father's kingdom once, where he'd ruled with bitter authority and crushed dreams smaller than his own disappointments. Now it was mine, and every sunrise that painted its walls aurora pink was a reminder some dreams are too big to fit in small minds, and that's exactly why they're worth pursuing. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to prove doubters wrong? What's your revenge success story? Let me know in the comments.